All right, back with episode number 2 of Structures. Hopefully, this time I'll do better. Maybe I'll do worse. We'll see. Stay tuned and find out. But I got a very great guest today. Who am I talking to today?
Hey, what's up? It's Mike from Music Projects, Munt Cascade, Anal Catharsis, a few other things. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Hey, thanks, man. I appreciate your time today. Give us for people who don't know you, just a quick little bit about your your location, what you're into, and all that. I know you mentioned your projects, but kind of show us where you're at in the world and what's going on with you lately.
Sure. Yeah, I'm from South Brooklyn. I've been doing stuff with music and sounds, pretty much my whole life. Although I only really started taking things a bit more seriously over like the past couple of years, especially over COVID. It's like when I got into streaming and stuff like that, which is kind of like my main focus right now artistically. Yeah, really big into death metal, noise, improvised music, a lot of like free folk stuff.
Oh, that's cool, man. I like that streaming stuff too. I tried it out upon your encouragement or invitation on Twitch, but I quickly found out I did not have the all the right tools or internet connection strength to do it very well. But I'd love to revisit that one day. I like the community there. It looked pretty good, man.
Yeah, it's really fun. I'm a technology skeptic mostly.
Yeah.
I'm not really a big fan of a lot of the ways that like technology is like integrated into our lives and like made us more isolated.
Yeah.
But I feel like the streaming thing is like pretty cool just because like you can hang out with people like pretty much all over the world, and I don't know, it kind of does like a very opposite thing than I feel like a lot of technology does. Even like cell phones and shit, I feel like most people just use them to like scroll on apps and stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah.
No, you're in good company here, man. I'm not a high tech guy, and I agree with your sentiment there on the streaming. It's like it's kind of it's high tech if you want to say that, but it's also kind of bringing it back to a real time interaction with like minded individuals, and I think that's really cool. That's why I like it, and I'd love to try it again someday. You sent me some picture. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was also gonna say it's like also really great for just like doing collaborative stuff and like even just like doing things like I never really thought of. With like sort of technology and stuff evolving. It's like I do a lot of collabs with like visual artists and stuff like that for my streams, and I'm starting to get some information on doing some like even remote jamming sort of situations. I've done like a couple before, but actually like setting that stuff up is like a little bit above my tech knowledge, so slowly getting into that. But
by remote jamming, you mean jamming with other people in other locations?
Yeah. I've done it before using a software called Jamtaba, which was pretty difficult to get working, and I imagine it's probably even more difficult to like set up a server and stuff like that. So it's a little bit of a future project, but definitely something I want to check out and do more of.
That sounds really cool. For me personally, if I do remote jamming, that means I'm away from town in the woods making music. It's that kind of remote.
Yeah.
But I was going to say, you sent me some pictures, man. Explain or tell the folks what we're looking at here.
Sure. So, let me just pull them up on my end.
Oh, my bad. I should have given you a heads up. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess we'll start with the picture of me in the wizard hat. That's, I guess, like my streaming and like internet presence sort of profile picture. The whole wizard hat thing kind of comes about from the album cover for the Anal Catharsis release, Bong is Taiwanese for Chalice, which like you know, it's kind of like, I guess, like a signature sort of look to myself. Even though it's like not really visible on that particular album cover. And even like the photo shoot that this was taken from, it's like pretty heavily edited. You can't really see it too much. But yeah, you know, the wizard hat is kind of like a common motif or theme in like a lot of the visual things I do with photography in relation to my music. So that's why I got that one up there.
And why is that? Why is that a theme, or is it just the thing that happened?
It's kind of like a thing that happened. Like most of the I would say like the overall theme of Anal Catharsis is sort of like this very raw impulsiveness. You know, like none of our music is really like pre-planned. Everything's pretty like on the fly, on the go. And when we were like doing the photo for that album cover, we kind of were just like grabbing a bunch of random shit I had lying around. This is from like a Halloween costume I did when I was a kid. I like dressed up as Gandalf.
Nice.
Yeah, and so I just threw it on, and it kind of like became a sort of a thing, you know. I on Halloween, stuff like that, a lot of times I'll do like events with the Golden Shrimp Guild, which is like another Twitch music collective or whatever. So I'll always throw it on for like Halloween and stuff like that.
Oh, it sounds like a improv turned into the theme. I like it. Like stuff you're laying around, you know.
Yeah, pretty much. And I guess the reason why it's like it's also sort of connected to my stuff with streaming is because even though I guess sonically the stuff I do with Anal Catharsis and the stuff I do for my streaming project are sonically like very different, they kind of come from the same place, you know?
Yeah.
It's all just like very on the fly, like very little planning. You know, I always like to say that like I'm not even doing it. I'm just kind of like a vessel.
Absolutely. That's exactly how I feel about it when I really get in a flow. It's not it doesn't feel as much like I'm making music as I am finding it or just letting it flow, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And I guess that's like the common link between those two things, even though they don't really sound similar. Like my process between the two projects is like very similar. I'd say like the only difference is like with Anal Catharsis, it's pretty much always collaborative. Whereas like my streaming stuff, I very rarely do like audio collaborations like with other people, but I do frequently do visual collaborations, which I guess could bring us to the next photo, which is like the weird fractally looking stuff in the TV screen.
Yeah. Just one note on that previous one though, you grow a much better beard than I do. Okay, and I'm sorry to interrupt you. Yeah,
No, you're good.
The fractals. That's a cool image.
Yeah, this is a still image actually from a broadcast I did yesterday with my longtime video collaborator VJ Pussycat. We actually met like way before I was doing any sort of stuff on Twitch. I actually got started doing live streaming stuff when Reddit briefly had live streaming on it. I don't know if you're privy to that whole scene when it was a thing.
No, I'm not.
Yeah, it was like, it came out like in 2020 or so, and it was like, it was just like streaming like just straight from your phone. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen like Instagram lives and stuff like that, where it's just kind of like streaming from your phone. And I was just like bored as shit at home, and one of my best friends and probably my most frequent collaborator for Anal Catharsis is from India, and he went home when like the pandemic happened and whatnot. And he mailed me a sitar.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and I had it for maybe like a month before like all the lockdowns and stuff happened, and I was just like, you know, super bored at home, and I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna like start practicing the sitar, because like who knows when this is gonna be over, and like maybe I'll like learn how to play by the time it's over.
Yeah.
And I found out about like the Reddit live streaming thing, And it was just a combination between like the desire for like social interaction when it was hard to come by, mixed with like I guess like sort of the desire to just like hang out and jam and learn instruments. So I basically just documented sort of my learning process like through live streaming. So I would go live maybe like 2 to 3 hours for like almost a year, maybe almost 2.
Cool.
And that's how I met Pussycat. They were like one of my first like frequent visitors on my stream. And before I got into the Twitch thing and whatnot, I knew that they were like a live visuals artist. They did work with the Mermen, I believe, if you're familiar with them. And I was having a lot of problems with getting banned on Reddit Live because I used to live in a basement and there's like no AC or anything like that, and it got super hot down there. So I'd always like stream shirtless.
Yeah.
And like my streams on the Reddit Live fairly popular, and it's like the moderation system on that platform is like dog shit.
Yeah.
So if there's like a couple thousand people watching, and like maybe 5% of them like report the stream, like you'll just get banned.
Yeah.
Like no questions asked, and so it's like then I have to reach out to moderators and get unbanned. So
kind of a hassle.
It kind of grew into this thing where it was just like so much effort to sort of keep it going, which is why I eventually like turned to doing stuff on Twitch, which was not the smoothest transition, just because like I never knew how to like work all this tech shit. Do you know what I mean? Like with the Reddit Live. Yeah, with the Reddit Live stuff, it was pretty much just like I go on Reddit on my phone, I just press go live. You know what I mean? But now I'm like working with like an audio interface and like mic placement, and so it was like a pretty difficult transition. But at the start of that, we had sort of already been in talks about doing collaborative work. And then so once I got on Twitch, they started doing some stuff on Twitch, and then our stream relationship sort of evolved from there. Like the first 2 years or so that I was on Twitch, I collaborated with them pretty much every single stream.
Nice. That's really cool to meet people in other parts of the world that you really vibe with like that, and keep doing things together.
Yeah, no, they're a phenomenal artist, and like we've been sort of like working together so long that I feel like we have like a really good flow. We've taken like a little bit of a break over like the past couple months. I know they were having like tech issues, and also like life happens, and it becomes like a little bit more difficult to sort of keep with that constant schedule. So it was sort of breaking away from the constant collaboration was also a little bit of a difficult thing, because I had never worked in like a visual, like a video visual medium before. And I guess that'll bring us to the next one, which is the very deep fried image of me messing around with some synthesizers and stuff.
Yeah, I like that. It's like
very
visuals or like static-y look. Yeah, pixelated, yeah.
Yeah, and so that's basically like once our regular collaborations slowed down a little bit, I sort of had to start thinking about like what I'm gonna do for visuals, Yeah. And it was kind of an interesting process, sort of figuring that whole thing out, because I'm sort of very active. I'm very actively working on the music stuff. One of the best things about having like a visual collaborator is that you don't really have to worry about that stuff.
Right.
It's very like, I don't really want to like mess with the visuals all that much. And like, there's some people who do really incredible stuff on Twitch with visuals. Dr. Hamburger 666, who I've also collaborated with, and Echo Lightwave Unspeakable also does really awesome visual work. There's honestly too many people to really name them all. There's a ton of really awesome like video and audio artists on Twitch, but a lot of the really, really cool stuff that I've seen, it seems like a little bit involved. Whereas, like, for me, I really wanted something where I could kind of like set it and forget it.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I just really wanted to focus on like the sounds. You know, it's already kind of like a lot managing, you know, talking to people in Twitch chat while you're playing, and you know, gear and loopers and synthesizers and stuff like that, you know, really do help out with that because they're somewhat automated. But it's definitely too much of a task for me to sort of actively work live on visuals while doing music and also sort of paying attention to what's going on
I don't doubt it,
in the stream and the viewers. Yeah, so that's when I kind of got into, I guess, like what I call like video deep fry, where I'm kind of just layering as many like video filters as I can over my video source. So like using a combination of like chroma key, which is like the green screen sort of thing. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Where like it'll select a color and then like remove that color.
Yeah.
So I use that like without a green screen to get like really patchy sort of empty parts in the video. And then I usually stack like a bunch of sharpening filters and color corrections and that sort of thing, and maybe an image behind it to sort of get this like very staticky, constantly shifting sort of look. And then I'll usually throw like a screen capture on top of that so that it sort of video feedbacks. Right. And so then you get variation in the visuals because the source is kind of like shaky and almost like visual snowish.
Yeah.
And so it like the feedback doesn't have like a constant image, and so the feedback sort of does this its own like generative visual work.
That's awesome, dude.
Yeah. And that I guess was like my solution to sort of the visuals problem, because like music on Twitch and sounds on Twitch and like art on Twitch, it's very much the audio and visual experience. You know?
Yeah.
And as much as it kind of was like a little bit of a daunting task to sort of like break into the visual space, because I really don't consider myself like too much of a visual artist. You know, I'll do some like visual art as sort of like a very casual thing, but it's never been something I've thought I was particularly good at. But I am pretty happy with this sort of setup. I
think you should be. I like it. I like the look of it. I've seen a couple of your videos on there before on Twitch, and I wondered how you did that. Yeah, so I'm gonna listen back and take notes and maybe play around someday with that as well. What device are you playing in that picture?
Oh, that's the Landscape Noon. It's a quote unquote, I guess, like a passive drum synthesizer, although I don't use it for drums. It's like kind of my main harsh noise, I guess, sort of companion. I'm very fascinated with, like, especially in like a noise context, of more so the process of how a sound is made than like even the net result. And what I love of using the synthesizer for is patching its output into a envelope follower, so that will like generate a signal based on the volume output, right? And then feeding that back into its input. So it has like no power to it. So like by passive, it like doesn't get plugged in. It's just powered by the control voltage. And so you can get these really interesting chaotic feedback loops. And that's sort of like the main base for my sound. Even if I'm having like other pieces of gear or other synthesizers and stuff like that, like that sort of initial feedback loop is always kind of like the main thing that's changing stuff in the whole setup.
I like that. That's real creative, man. And I know what you mean about it getting lost in the more so the process than the actual final result. Sometimes it's just as captivating, you know.
Yeah. I mean, really, my process when I'm doing just like a strictly noise-based broadcast is really just trying to build, I guess, sort of like the most interesting or most complex feedback loop that I can. I like kind of really got started doing noise stuff with just like no input mixing, and I find this sort of process to be like very similar in workflow to no input mixing.
Gotcha. Looks like you got a couple of pictures of you playing some music here too.
Yeah. So I guess we'll start with the one that's like surrounded by all the satellite dishes.
Yeah.
This is taken from a day I was jamming with some of my buddies for Anal Catharsis, which is the project I mentioned before. Mm-hmm. It's sort of like mostly improvised folk music. We do have like a few tracks here and there that are like fairly different, but I would say like sort of the most standard thing is jamming with the instrument that I'm holding there. It's the stick dulcimer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
so you play it
kind of
like a guitar instead of a hammered dulcimer.
Yeah, it's like it's, I guess, sort of like a guitarified version of a mountain dulcimer, if you've ever seen that instrument.
I know if I saw it, I'd know what you're talking about, but I can't bring it up in my mind.
It kind of like looks like like a lap steel pedal, or one of those like the flat guitars or whatever.
Yeah.
It's kind of similar to that, but you don't really play the stick one in like with a slide or anything like that. I guess you could, but it's very much like a guitarified version of it. Like it has frets and
mm-hmm.
that sort of thing. And what really drew me to the instrument is the fact that it's not chromatic. Like it only plays the major scale, and I feel like to some extent, some people might view that as like it's I guess easier, or it's almost like there's less thought, or it kind of takes less skill to play. But that's like the thing that I like the most about it.
Yeah.
Because it kind of removes me from like this thought process of like playing in key, or like where are my fingers going. It kind of very immediately brings you to that spot of, like I was saying before, where you're not really playing, you're sort of just finding.
Yeah.
It's almost like mindless. And that's sort of always been like the common motif with that project, Anal Catharsis, where it's just kind of super, it's like almost hyper improvised.
Yeah. So easier instruments just help with that flow.
Yeah, pretty much. And we do some other stuff. I've like played guitar on a couple things. We really do sort of branch out with like a lot of different instruments. I play quite a few things, and my friends here in the project also are great musicians. You can see my buddy Manny next to me. He's playing the banjo. We actually have a couple people that play the banjo.
Is he playing the banjo or shredding the banjo behind his head? That's what it looks like.
He's shredding. Yeah, he's shredding. Yeah, like it's really like a super collaborative sort of thing, and it's, I guess, more so really about, even on like the tracks that we release, not even about like how they necessarily sound, but sort of like the feeling of the tangible energy of the jam.
Right.
Like we record everything just like on the voice memo on my phone. No microphones, no nothing. I feel like a lot of the times when you like actually set up to record something well, there's like almost this knowledge of like, oh, it's on, like we're going, that kind of brings you out of that headspace. And I guess everything with the project is sort of very much focused around like trying to make it as raw as possible. Not necessarily in like the way that, you know, like a black metal record is raw, where it's like recorded badly.
Right.
It's just like not recorded well, or almost like not recorded for
Mass consumption.
clarity. Yeah.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. And like I said before, it like that sort of thought process really does creep into my like live streaming sort of process. You know, before I had the moniker on Twitch, Munt Cascade, my name on Twitch was Rumpeldickskin, which is how I credit myself on Anal Catharsis Records. And one of the reasons why I don't kind of use my real name on those recordings is because of what I said before, where it's like, it's not really me who's playing,
Right.
you know? And so I've always kind of thought that like all the stuff that I do for my broadcasts are very much like an extension of this project, or I guess sort of, it's like my solo works that I guess could be on this project.
Yeah. Yeah, I like your idea with that, because by not putting your own name on it, in a sense, it goes along with your idea of how you're recording it too. It's like kind of stepping out of that headspace, and it's just all about the flow of the art, of the sounds, you know.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, I really don't feel a sense of like ownership over that material.
Is that because of how you guys do it, or because you're not the only one in the group?
I think it's just like how we do it, you know. I'm like, I guess kind of like I'm also somebody who's like bad with compliments. So like a lot of the times, like people like tell me like, oh, you're good at playing guitar or something like that. It kind of makes me uncomfortable. One, I think just because I'm bad at taking compliments, and two, because I also kind of genuinely feel like I'm not really doing it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, but in a sense, it's also, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
I totally know where you're coming from, but, you know, don't cut yourself short, because it took you practice to be able to get in that flow, you know?
Oh, yeah, for sure. But yeah, and I guess this also kind of goes back to the naming conventions of both of those projects, Munt Cascade and Anal Catharsis, which they're both gross. Like one of them is shitting and one of them is puking, which I think comes from my background in death metal. Like death metal was kind of my first true music obsession. And you know, I like all types of gross sounds and you know, nasty album covers and like that sort of thing, but it also definitely comes from this sort of idea that it's compulsive. It's not necessarily a willing sort of thing. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I like that.
You don't shit or puke because like you want to shit or puke. You shit or puke because like you have to.
You have to.
It's
yeah.
sort of like a like necessary expulsion.
It's like gross and poetic. I like that.
Yeah.
What's this other pick you got? Looks like you're playing a gig somewhere.
Yeah, this is a picture of me playing with my death metal band, Dread Emperor. We're on a little bit of a hiatus right now. We actually only played like a handful of shows, but you know, I don't really have like a lot of photos of me actually playing or whatever. So I thought this is a good one to include. You know, like I said before, like death metal is kind of like my first musical love. And while I don't necessarily play as much death metal as I used to, and also I don't really listen to as much death metal as I used to, it still is like, I think it'll always kind of like be something that I'm doing.
Yeah.
You know?
Got a little piece of your heart.
Of course. Yeah.
I love
this project's super fun.
That photo too.
Oh, dude, thank you. Yeah, this was a really, really fun show. And I guess this project is also an offshoot of Anal Catharsis, because my drummer and my bass player are also featured on a fair number of Anal Catharsis recordings. And this was also something I started to get going like in 2020 during the pandemic. I was just kind of like home jamming on some death metal riffs, and I was like, you know, this is like, I guess, like a good time to sort of work on stuff like this, because I had nothing else going on, you know.
Yeah.
My buddy Lucas, who's playing the drums, you unfortunately can only see like a little tiny piece of his head in this photo.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time, he wasn't really like a drummer per se, you know. Like I had jammed with him a couple times, and like he was able to like play drums and stuff like that, but he definitely at the time like wasn't a drummer, and especially the sort of like super fast, super brutal like death metal stuff was like not really like in his wheelhouse. But you know, we just kind of really kept at it over, you know, 2020, 2021, and I'm honestly like really happy with sort of the progress that we made as like a band. And unfortunately, like I did move a little bit further away from them. It's been like kind of difficult to practice and stuff like that, but I'm hoping to, you know, get back into it with them like sometime soon.
Man, I really admire all your different outlets and various projects you got going on. It seems like you have a lot of opportunities and outlets for that flow and that creativity. So that's good on you for that, man.
Yeah, I mean, I really just I play a lot of different styles of music, and I really enjoy a lot of different styles of music. So it's almost like you know, especially with the death metal stuff, it was just like I loved death metal for so long, and I had never really like done it. It was just like one of those things where I was like, I kind of have to do this, you know, like this is, if I had to like sort of nail down like one genre of music that like really defines me, even more so than like, you know, I listen and play mostly noise stuff these days, but if I had to like define myself by like a musical subgenre, I would definitely say death metal for sure.
That's cool, man. And now that you've kind of gave us an overview of your projects and everything, let's rewind, man. Tell us a little bit about your early years and how it was growing up, your situation, and what drew you into music, or what opportunity presented itself to get you involved in music in the first place.
Yeah, well, I think I've always been pretty fascinated by sounds. I don't necessarily have a memory of this, but my dad always shows me this photo of like when I was like really little. I was like in a crib, and he like put his guitar in there, and I'm like slapping it. Which I actually would love to get a copy of that photo, because it is like a photo that I do really like. And I've always, I guess, like sort of tangentially been involved in music. You know, my dad has always played guitar and stuff like that. And I've always been involved in like school band and these sort of things. But there was always something about music, and like especially my early years, that I didn't necessarily like. There was always something about it that kind of was bringing me back to it. I've always been listening to music. But I never really like found something that I was like obsessed with until I was like maybe 14 or 15, and I started like listening to like death metal stuff. But before then, I used to play saxophone, like alto sax, in school band. I did like a little bit of piano lessons as a kid, but I like never really took to that kind of stuff. There was always something about the music that I was exposed to as like a kid that didn't speak to me.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
there was something about it that I liked, but there was also something about it that I like didn't like. And I would say like leading up to the point of sort of discovering death metal, that's sort of the defining motif of like the years of doing music before that point, where I liked the physical act of playing the saxophone, but I was never really too into like the actual music that we were doing. And I guess sort of same thing with like learning music theory and these sort of things. It never was something that like sort of like latched onto me or I found interesting. And I don't really have like great memory of like listening to music before I was maybe like 12. My memory's a little bit shot. But I'm sure I was to some extent. But sort of, I guess when I was maybe like 12 or so, I started getting into like, I know it's not like not technically like emo or whatever. I'm not really sure like what the subgenre would be called, but like sort of stuff like My Chemical Romance and Pierce the Veil, and I guess like a lot of these like teen metal bands or so. I don't even know like necessarily what to call them, but there was something about it that I liked. I liked the harshness and the intensity of a lot of that music, but it was often like coupled with clean singing and too much melody. And so I kind of like evolved from those projects to maybe like stuff that's like a little bit more extreme, like Asking Alexandria and maybe like some other screamo sort of projects. But even then there's something about that music that I like didn't like. And I guess this sort of conflict between like liking something about it and disliking something about it is, I guess, sort of like a common thing that has kind of kept going, because I would say that's also true for like my adventure and my my sort of exploration into like very harsh music, like harsh noise and stuff like that, where there's like an intrigue and an interest, but also like a repulsion.
Yeah.
Like there's something that I don't like about it, but there's also something that kind of kept me coming back to it. And I think that's one of the things that like really drew me to death metal in particular, because there is that contradiction almost to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, you know, like you enjoy it, but it's also like gross and disgusting.
Yeah, it makes you ask yourself some questions, huh?
Yeah. And I guess sort of over time, this sort of push and pull eventually landed me like into listening to bands like Death and Cannibal Corpse, and that's sort of when I really like sunk my teeth in and became like totally obsessed with sounds and music. And it's when I like picked up guitar and, you know, I started to learn how to play Dark Throne songs, and it kind of just went from there.
Now, you mentioned your dad played guitar. Was he involved in you getting your first instrument?
Yeah, for sure. You know, my dad's always been like a huge, like, he's always like really pushed me to do things with music. And I say like early on, I wasn't too fond of it. You know, I kind of felt like a little bit forced or pushed into it. But I mean, like retrospectively, it's like it's something I'm like infinitely grateful for, because I don't think that I'd sort of like be where I'm at right now creatively if it wasn't for like that sort of early influence. It's kind of odd how stuff like that works.
Yeah, and maybe you know, with it being your own dad, he knew you well enough to know that, you know, maybe that would be something good for you, and that's why he kind of encouraged you in that direction.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, you know, me and my dad don't really have much of like a crossover in musical interest. You know, I would say the closest it gets is like John Fahey type stuff. But you know, he's not really into the whole metal thing or the super weird shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
But nevertheless, I do think that sort of his early influence has definitely like been a key thing that sort of had put me into the spot that I'm in now.
Maybe I didn't hear you say this, but what was your first instrument?
My first instrument, I mean, it depends. You know, if you count the slapping the guitar in my crib, I think that me personally, I consider that my first instrument. Also because I very much see the line between instrument and non-instrument like blurred.
Right.
You know, I've always been like somebody who, it's like if I see something and I think it might make a cool noise, like I have to hit it with something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I love it.
So in like a weird sort of way, I would almost say that noise was my first instrument. And I feel like it's the case probably for a lot of people that noise is their first instrument. But I guess if we're to ignore that and sort of move on to like traditional sort of concept of instrument, I think it was piano. I took a little bit of piano lessons when I was like maybe 8 or something like that. Not for very long, but
yeah, you know, I did that too. I didn't like it, at least at that age. I wanted to rock, man. I didn't want to play piano, you know?
yeah, no, like I really like wasn't too into the piano. Like I do appreciate the piano these days, and like, you know, my mom has kind of kept up with it a little bit. So like she has like a piano in their house. So I'll always like mess around with it when I'm home and stuff like that. And you know, I don't know if you've seen some of the stuff I've posted on my Instagram of me playing the harmonium, which is sort of like a accordion keyboard reed organ sort of situation. So like, you know, I do like keyboards. It's definitely not my instrument of choice. But you know, like as I've gotten older, I've come to appreciate them a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, throughout your journey in life and art, have you had any major setbacks or obstacles you've had to address and overcome in order to help you continue on your path?
You know, I would say probably the biggest one is what I was mentioning before with sort of like my struggles with that period where I was like transitioning from streaming on Reddit to streaming on Twitch, where, you know, I was just very much used to just clicking, you know, go live and then just playing the sitar for a little bit. And then kind of moving that over to Twitch, where it's like I needed an audio interface and I needed to like mic up my instrument and like these sort of things. It like, that was very much a learning experience. And I kind of did that in conjunction with learning stuff about modular. It's like also around the same time I got into doing stuff on VCV Rack. Mm-hmm. And that's also I would say like 0.0 of what my streams are now today. You know?
Yeah.
That's like when I really started incorporating the visual element. And once I had been playing around with VCV Rack for like a couple months, I wasn't doing just straight jamming the sitar, just like dry through a microphone. I like started doing some audio processing and using loopers, and that whole process sort of evolved into what my streams are now, where it's like a lot of technology, you know,
yeah.
A lot of synthesizers, a lot of effects. And, you know, I went from something that was like very minimal and very raw. And while I do feel like what I do now is still very raw, it's become a lot more complex.
Right, definitely. Yeah, and you're light years ahead of me, man. That's you know, you've done well, because I'm still learning so much about all the tech possibilities in this. You know?
Yeah, there's so much more for me to learn too. I mean, you know, there's just like a whole boatload of really cool shit you can do with technology. Like I mentioned before, the remote jamming sort of thing. You know, and even further than that, and I guess doesn't really have to do with music, but one of my favorite streamers, P-Chops, he uses like a AI chatbot sort of thing, that I guess integrates with like the quote unquote lore of his stream.
Yeah.
Where I don't know if you've ever like gone into his streams before, but it's like, you know, there's like these purple chickens, and like he'll usually do like a PowerPoint presentation about how, you know, we're getting brainwiped and we're on this undersea lair, and it all kind of like ties in together with this AI chatbot, where it's like you can ask it questions about like this fictional place, and it'll like give you like answers that are consistent with the fiction.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense. And it's like stuff like that is amazing to me.
It is. I know what you're talking about. I've watched a couple of his streams or videos, and that explains a lot, because I was like, what in the world's going on? Like, I really liked it. I love the sci-fi, you know, fun element of it, but there was like something I couldn't put my finger on, like, what's really going on? And I guess that's it, the generative chat kind of thing.
Yeah.
Real creative.
Yeah, his whole process is honestly really, really cool. That's a person that I really feel like has like a significantly better grasp on like the technology sort of situation, like has a little bit more knowledge on like what is possible with like the tools at their disposal in terms of like, you know, AI and, you know, generative visuals. And he does his visuals like live, I'm pretty sure.
What is some of your goals coming up in the near future or long term for your own music?
I really want to reboot a project that I started when I was in high school, called, I'm going to butcher this because it's a Swedish word, bottenlös. It's the Swedish word for bottomless. It's a reference to probably my favorite album. I'm going to butcher the shit out of this, by the way, because it's in Swedish. But it's Joe Doden's album, Sitandis I Sean Medvaten over Havuden.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, that's definitely not how you pronounce it, but that album like really was a game changer for me. It's, I guess, sort of a folk album. It's like sort of similar to Over at parts, but there's also like sections where it's just like straight up gnarly black metal, but with this like really strange riffage to it. It was just kind of like this perfect blend of weirdness and folk aesthetics and black metal aesthetics that like really spoke to me at the time. And so I took the name of the project from my favorite track off that album. And I really initially intended it to be sort of like a over worship album, or a over worship project, where it's just kind of like, you know, like neo folk sort of stuff. And I never really did too much with it. I had released some tracks briefly, and they were kind of like my first foray into like recording stuff in a DAW. So I'm not really like too happy with those tracks. They're not online anymore. But I have always sort of wanted to do something in that vein. And like these days I'm starting to play a lot more guitar again. I've just been like very focused on sort of my stream stuff. And now that I'm kind of getting back to playing guitar, I like really want to start making more of that kind of stuff. Although I guess the vision for the project has sort of changed. It's definitely going to be a little bit more American folk influenced, you know, like John Fahey, Jack Rose kind of stuff. But yeah, that's something that's on my list right now. I'm just kind of in the writing and practicing phase for that. So I'm hoping maybe sometime this year or next year I'll have like a demo or something prepared. But right now I'm just kind of having a lot of fun jamming on guitar, you know, playing those twangy riffs with finger picks, you know, having fun with it. So that's like, I guess, sort of like my main goal right now. I guess in addition to sort of keeping up, my streaming stuff and, trying to get together with people to jam for Anal Catharsis. I feel like there's something else. Oh, yeah. I'm also working on a project right now that's also, I guess, kind of folkish. It's maybe more in the realms of like ambient and drone, with my buddy Nick from the band Blemish. Our project's called Revive Lazarus. We just actually recorded some stuff the other day. I'm hoping that we could probably have something out sometime this year. That's also with like acoustic stuff. It's just kind of like acoustic drone ambient kind of stuff, I guess, sort of in the vein of like natural snow buildings or Pelt, if you're familiar with either of those projects.
Yeah, well, no, I don't know those projects, but your description of what you're doing is really captured my interest. I look forward to hearing something of that, like some acoustic drone folk stuff. Sounds real interesting.
Yeah, I love that sort of sound. That's really the sound that I was working with before I started doing mostly harsh noise on my streams. My evolution sort of into that realm really went from, playing the sitar live on Reddit to kind of moving to Twitch and integrating it with, lots of reverb and delays and samplers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then sort of like integrating more and more stuff into it. So there was definitely a point in my broadcast I really was doing that sort of like ambient free folk drone sort of stuff a lot, and then it eventually turned into noise just because I think I'm like a dissonance and distortion junkie, obviously, with my real love being death metal, and like, I was always kind of just like making this stuff and then just trying to push it as far as I could. And it kind of was a very natural evolution from doing that stuff to making harsh noise, which is kind of funny considering it's like now when I do my noise stuff, there's almost no acoustic sources and there's almost like no processing. It's all just like very raw. I don't even really use distortion much in my noise stuff. It's just loud as hell synthesizers,
yeah,
contact mic and stuff. But that sort of sound was really like the bridge between, playing acoustic instruments primarily and moving into making noise.
Well, I love it, man. I think you're onto some good stuff, and I'm really grateful that you share it like you do, and of course that I got to meet you and connect with you. I love meeting unique and creative individuals, man, and I appreciate you reaching out to me about Twitch and stuff too, which I'll try again, and I'm super grateful you're on the show today. It's so cool.
Yeah, dude, I appreciate it. If you ever need any help with getting your sounds on Twitch, hit me up. And I guess that goes for anybody else listening who wants to, get into doing broadcasts and stuff like that. If you need any help, my DMs are open. It's something I'm super passionate about. I think more people should do it. Be more than happy to help.
That's awesome, man. That reminds me, I forgot. I wanted to do this at the beginning, but I forgot. Tell everyone where they can find you online.
Sure. My Instagram and Twitch handles are Munt Cascade. That's MUNTCASCADE. You could find the Anal Catharsis material on Bandcamp. And same thing with the Dread Emperor material is also on Bandcamp.
And I don't want to cut you off prematurely. Is there anything else you want to share or talk about?
I don't think I have anything off the top of my head.
All right. And is there any in your homies you want to give a shout out to? Yeah.
I want to give a shout out to my buddy Pratul. he's probably my most frequent collaborator for Anal Catharsis. He's the guy who hooked me up with the sitar. I pretty much wouldn't be doing what I'm doing right now without his influence. Great musician. Really also is, I would say, defined by the same sort of ethos creatively, you know, with the sort of almost mindlessness of it all. I feel like in terms of, you know, synergy when doing stuff together, I think that our synergy is kind of unparalleled by like any other person that I've really jammed with. We just really kind of get each other, and meeting him was a super sort of pivotal thing in my creative process. So, you know, I got to give a shout out to him. I want to give a shout out to my buddy Kyle. He's like my childhood best friend. He got me into folk music. He plays the banjo. We jam all the time. Great dude. I think that might be it for my shouts. I don't want to, you know, there's a lot of people I want to shout out, but I don't want to be here forever. You know?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, and I guess I'll give like a general shout out to, you know, my Twitch family. You guys are awesome, especially the Noise Monday crew. I guess that's a good thing to shout out.
Yeah, do that.
Yeah, I'm part of an event that we do every Monday. We call it Noise Monday. It's like usually about 12 hours of just noise and weird audio shit, weird visual shit on Twitch. It's not necessarily specifically for like harsh noise. It's kind of an anything goes kind of thing. As long as it's weird and noisy and strange, you know, we'll have it on. You know, so if there's any other noise heads out there, or anybody who does weird visual art or just anything strange, you know, you could hit me up. I could give you the link to where we organize. And, you know, we're always looking for new people to hop on. It's dope. You should check out Noise Monday. There's not really like a link per se that I could give you for that. You know, it's kind of just like we organize it internally and just like kind of post a flyer on like our social media pages. So we don't really have like a website or anything like that, but
that's good, man. And I can say personally, I popped in a few times. I can never watch a lot of it because I work every Monday all day, but no, I've had a few chances to pop in and see, and it's a real treat, man. So I definitely encourage people to check it out.
Yeah, it's really dope. It's just really awesome to just sort of have like an online space to hang out with people that are like-minded every day. You know, I'm usually working on Mondays too. My job, thankfully, is like not super intense, so it's like I get to catch a fair amount of it. It's just really dope to, you know, hang out with some people who are also making sounds, like weird sounds. You know, it's just a great vibe. And, you know, I'd say like sort of meeting up with that crowd and sort of, you know, starting off doing the Noise Monday thing, like really was a pretty pivotal moment as well in sort of my exploration to streaming and stuff like that. Before then, I didn't really necessarily have like a tight-knit community, you know? Like through my evolution doing my broadcasts, I very much like accumulated people who would watch, and then I would start doing something different. And it was just, I feel like before that point, it was just kind of very difficult to kind of keep a consistent viewer base because I was kind of just like doing so many different things, you know?
Yeah.
Which makes sense, you know. It's like if you're into sitar music and like chill like ambient sort of vibes, you know, the whole harsh noise thing is kind of like a almost a polar opposite sort of switch. So I feel like kind of before I met up with those guys and started doing that with that community, it kind of was like a little bit of a difficult process sort of getting there. So I'm very grateful for them and the opportunity, and, you know, they're all great musicians, noisemakers, visual artists. You know, people do all types of weird shit that I like would have never even thought of, messing with VHS tapes and just like playing like a VHS tape of like commercials through too many audio effects and too many visual effects. And it's like, there's just so much shit that people do on there that I'm like, man, that's so creative, so cool. Like, we're really living in a dope time that, sort of technology enables us to do this kind of stuff. So shout out to the Noise Monday crew.
Yeah, shout out to Noise Monday. And I like to wrap up every episode by asking if you have a word of encouragement or motivation for the listeners in their journey.
I'm not somebody who's like too great with words, but I would just say, sort of keep at it. I feel like there's definitely been times where I sort of am looking at things from what I kind of deceive myself to be like an objective lens, where it's like I'll make something and like when I'm making it I think it's good, and then sort of upon revisiting it I'm like, I wish I could change X or change Y, or I would say just sort of to, as much as it's important to know what you like and you dislike, it's also very important to be able to sort of shut off that judgment, especially when you're sort of making things. And don't be hard on yourself, and art's not a competition, and you don't need skill to make great art.
Yeah, you just need a passion for it,
of course,
or even just a strong interest.
Yeah,
man, that's good, man. I appreciate you, Mike, very much. Thanks for your time today. I'm gonna let you go. Stay on the line though, and I want to remind everyone to check back for the next episode. And if you like it, let me know about it. Share it with your friends, and let's get this community going. So, Mike, thanks again.
No problem. Have a great one.
You too.